Not all countries have the same political structure of democracy that the UK has. Indeed, Joseph Stalin once said of his own country, "Those who cast the votes decide nothing. Those who count the votes decide everything." But where you have a genuine political democracy, there will always be politicians anxious to know what the electorate thinks so that they can tailor their policies to reflect those concerns.
When I go and knock on doors, as I do on a regular basis, I find a package of things people are interested in. And it tends to be the economy, it tends to be making sure we've got a good health system, a good education system, a good welfare system for people who've fallen on difficult times, good support for people who find it difficult to look after themselves, perhaps through disability, and a real thirst and an importance attached to environmental issues.
But it's difficult to be sure what issues people regard as being of greatest importance to them. Most have many concerns. How do they rank them?
One way to do it is to have a survey and to ask people. Give them, say, 10 major concerns and ask them to rank those concerns in order of importance.
I just wanted to ask if you can rank these issues in order of the importance to you.
The results are much as you might expect. In our survey, the top 10 matters contain no real surprises at all.
We know that we only need to interview a relatively small number of people to be fairly sure what the whole electorate thinks. But that only takes us so far.
Unfortunately, different groups within electorates attach different weights to different issues. It's clear, for example, that some issues have a higher priority among young voters, others among older groups. What would be useful to know is the issues that each group regards as important. If there are substantial differences, politicians can target different groups with different messages. If everyone thinks the same, then this won't be necessary.
That if you look at the attitudes of 12 to 15-year-olds and you ask them what are the issues that they're concerned about, the environment was coming up number one. But if you look at the 18 to 24-year-olds, it was down around 8th place. And then it came back in the slightly older age group as they had their family formations and they were having children. So they were worrying about what kind of a world we're bringing our kids up in. But the 18 to 24-year-olds were worried about getting a job, getting on in life, finding a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and so that's explained the difference between the age cohorts.
Do you think your priorities will change over the next 20 or 30 years?
Yeah, definitely. As soon as I've got a job or a family, everything's good. A full-time job, it depends on what sector I'm working in, and of course, yeah. Definitely will change.
Yeah, your views do change.
I think that the way people vote changes as you get older.
It may be that the concerns of younger people are quite different from the concerns of older people. One way we can test that is to do a survey. So we asked some under 40s and some over 40s to rank a whole load of issues in order of importance to them.
Well, education, obviously, because I'm a first year.
Obviously, being a student, yeah, that was the first thing I kind of looked at.
Jobs, education, health.
I chose employment. Obviously, I'm a final year student.
Healthcare, almost certainly.
Global warming has always been an issue. It's always going to be there. Yes, it's not that it's not important. It is very important, but it's not exactly going to be your main focus at the moment.
At this age, I think it's the only thing that...
It's the only thing that affects us, really.
Pensions, why does that figure so low in your...
Lots of people worried about it.
Sorry?
Because it's so far away.
Having established a typical ranking for each group, we then analyse the results by developing a rank correlation coefficient.
First, we'll explain what the term means. Then we'll be able to see how closely linked the two groups are in their thinking. Then you'll be able to see whether there's anything that surprises you about the results.
The data we collected is given in the table. We've ranked the issues according to the views expressed by the over 40s, but whether we present the survey results ranked by over 40s or under 40s, the coefficient will be the same. We haven't got a large enough sample for statistical significance, so we can't read too much into the result. But we're interested here in the method of analysing the results, not in their collection. We'll shortly see how close the two groups are in their rankings using Spearman's formula. The formula is R sub S equals 1 minus 6 sigma d squared over n times n squared minus 1. Now, before we work it out, let's make sure we understand the significance of the number that we'll obtain. If there were a perfect positive correlation of the kind shown below, then with this formula we would attain a score of +1. The rankings of the two groups would be identical. If there was a score of -1, it would be because there was a perfect negative correlation, each group's ranking being the complete opposite of the other. In our case, given the over 40s ranking, the under 40s rank would have health as 10, pensions at 9, and so on. And this is how that would look diagrammatically. Now we've plotted our actual data. It's clear that we don't have either a perfect positive or a perfect negative correlation, but it isn't easy to see if there's at least some positive correlation, some negative correlation, or no correlation at all. But our formula will tell us what we can't see clearly with the naked eye.
Now we're in a position to work out the correlation coefficient using the formula and see how we can use this information to help politicians target their message. And let's be clear, whatever they say, the politicians do care about these things.
It depends on who they're talking to. If they're talking to the television or to a public audience, they don't believe in opinion polls. If they're talking in private, they believe them beyond all recognition. And the third one, if they change their policies, I'm delighted because it says they're listening to public opinion. And if they're not there to represent the public, what are they doing in Parliament?
We're ready to work out the correlation coefficient using our formula. We can then see how this might give help to the politicians seeking to understand people's wishes. We begin our calculation by computing the differences in the rankings for each issue labelled D. So in column 4, we have for health 1 minus 4, which gives us -3. When we sum these differences at the bottom of the column, it will of course come to 0. So in column 5, we've squared each of the differences and then summed these. That way, we turn even negative numbers into positive numbers, and that's what we want. We're interested in the absolute differences of the rankings. In our case, the sum of these squared differences is 202. We can take this number and feed it into our formula and so produce our rank correlation coefficient. Our formula is R sub S equals 1 minus 6 sigma d squared over n times n squared minus 1. We've worked out that sigma d squared, the sum of the squared differences, is 202. We've 10 issues, so n equals 10. So this gives us R sub S equals 1 minus 6 times 202 over 10 times 100 minus 1, which equals 1 minus 1212 over 990, which equals minus 0.224. Now this is fairly close to 0, suggesting that our two groups have little in common when it comes to their views on the relative importance of the key issues of the day. If our data were to be representative, then a political party would be in difficulties. There's virtually no correlation between issues generally of greatest concern among younger people and issues generally of greatest concern amongst older people, this makes the task of finding a message appealing to all age groups very difficult. Developing policies on tax and spending, for example, becomes very awkward. Things can be even more difficult than this. Sometimes the significance of issues can vary between people in the same group.
It won't do for the politicians to take notice of old surveys. People's attitudes can change quite quickly. For example, in recent years, green issues have come to the fore. Huge changes in medical techniques have brought healthcare issues more to people's minds. On the other hand, better control of inflation has tended to push this down people's list of worries.
We'll always see health service as one of the most important issues. We'll always see the economy, but we have the economy much higher today than we did 10 years ago, that's for sure, in people's voting behavior. But remember, issues of not of the 80%, but of the 20% of floating voters, issues are only the prime consideration in 40% of those. Now, to use some more statistics, if you multiply 80% by 40%, you're down at 2% of the total electorate that you're talking about. And they're the people who say that it's the economy stupid.
So given the attitude changes that will inevitably take place over time, questionnaires of this kind are conducted regularly. These techniques of correlation are clearly useful for analysing political data, but they have a wide range of applications. Whenever in the social sciences we wish to make comparisons with sets of rankings, correlation coefficients will prove to be an important technique to use. But they do have their limits.
It doesn't tell us anything about the causal links between sets of data. And secondly, when we look at rank correlation, it doesn't tell us anything about the relative values that we place on issues, for example. So we don't know whether somebody rates issue number 2 a bit less important than issue number 1 or a great deal less important. But if we're aware of these limitations, then correlation coefficients can be very useful to us.
As a minister in government, the way we approach policy making is evidence-based. And I studied economics at university, and I actually studied statistics to a certain extent as well. And I find I use those skills now more than ever before, because you're analysing research to try and work out really what policy direction you're going to take and the effects of the policies that you're of the policy decisions that you're making. So statistics has, I think, a growing role to play in policy making.